Glory to God in the highest.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Armor of God again. And now I did not plan to release this video in the first place, but after listening to this interview about the Book of Enoch, I feel that this is something that I need to address. And I've asked this question during an interview many months ago about why the church will never approve the Book of Enoch. But first, let me share you this one from the interview between Michael and Tim Alberino, so that what Father Iannuzzi talked about in the clip that I'm going to share after this clip makes much more sense.
We have to deal with what I call the first cause. So let's assume for a moment that Genesis 6 is angels, and they're looking down at the daughters of men, and they're lusting after them.
Yeah.
They're desiring to take them as wives and to copulate with them, to have intercourse with them.
Yeah.
So what's the first cause here? Lust. It's because it was well known to the ancient Hebrews.
Yeah.
In the Book of Enoch, which was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Book of Enoch is actually quoted verbatim in the New Testament, in the Book of Jude, verbatim.
Right. So it's considered an apocryphal book or non-canonical book. It's not included in any canon of the Bible that we're familiar with. Certainly not in the history of the church, making ecumenical council formal decrees. But it has been around,
Except for in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia, both the Beta Israel Jews, the ancient Jewish community, and the Tawahedo Orthodox Christians long ago incorporated and preserved the Book of Enoch in their canon.
And as you say, there are references, it would seem, in the New Testament. So
Many.
what is, I didn't know
There are allusions. There are many allusions to the Book of Enoch. For example, when Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions. Well, where's that come from? The Book of Enoch.
Book of
It's
Enoch.
nowhere to be
I
found
don't
in
know,
the
I've
Old
never read the
Testament.
Book of Enoch.
There are many allusions, but then, as I said, in Jude, it's verbatim. And Jude says that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, and then copy, paste. Copy from 1st Enoch, paste into his epistle. So they were conversant. The early church, the church fathers, the disciples of Christ, Christ himself, and all of the writers of the Bible, all of them were conversant with the Book of Enoch. There's no question. In fact, I believe that if you were living in first century Jerusalem, before it was destroyed by the Romans, and if you were to walk into the temple during the time of Christ, into the synagogue, I think you would find in the scriptorium, where all of the sacred scrolls are kept, you would find a manuscript that was representative of what today we call 1st Enoch, Ethiopic Enoch.
I would even say, as someone who is totally innocent of the Book of Enoch, I've never read it, I have no strong opinions of whether it was some huge mistake not to include it in the canon. I don't think there are mistakes in the canon.
And I'm not arguing that it was, by the way.
Exactly. My view is, I think that the Proto-Evangelium of James, for instance, is an edifying work to read and can inform us. It's useful. Maybe it's not canon, but it's useful. And so that seems to be kind of the view that you're taking.
Well, I will say this, and that is my view, but I will say this, I'll add, that in the Book of Enoch, but the Book of Enoch is very complex. 1st Enoch, there are 3 different books of Enoch. Only one of them, portions of it, were written before Christ. That's the one I'm interested in, 1st Enoch. There's 2nd Enoch, which is called the Slavonic Enoch, and 3rd Enoch, which is called the Hebrew Enoch. 1st Enoch is known as the Ethiopian Enoch because the Ethiopians preserved it. 1st Enoch, the oldest portions of 1st Enoch, namely the Book of the Watchers and the Book of Parables, were most certainly written before Christ. And why is this important? Because some of the most extraordinary, astounding Christological prophecies pertaining to the Son of Man, which is the title that Jesus used most often when speaking of himself, are in the parables in 1st Enoch. I mean, absolutely stunningly accurate prophecies pertaining to Jesus of Nazareth, written before Christ.
Is there any dispute over the dating of the first Book of Enoch?
Most scholars will date, in fact, almost universally, scholars date the earliest portions of Enoch to sometime around 300 BC. Now, it's a complicated document because it's a compilation of text written by various authors. I'm most interested in the first 2 sections of 1st Enoch, which are the Book of the Watchers and the Parables, precisely because they're dated to before the birth of Christ. and my whole point in bringing up Enoch was you have that snippet in Genesis.
Yeah.
Well, that story is elaborated in the Book of Enoch. In fact, that's where the story comes from, is the Book of Enoch. That little reference in Genesis, if you want to know the full story of what the author is alluding to, you read First Enoch, specifically the Book of the Watchers, the first section. And it tells you this extraordinary narrative. I mean, it's what I call the Enochian tale. And about the sons of God, which are designated as watchers in First Enoch, that they're looking down, they're seeing the daughters of men, and it's basically almost copy paste into Genesis, the Genesis 6 reference. And intriguingly enough, in R.H. Charles' translation, it's the same verses, Genesis 6, 1 through whatever it is, 4, I think.
I know it was a little bit long, but please remember the points discussed in that last clip and compare it to the following clip from my interview with Father before. And I started the question back then by asking him whether it's safe for us to refer to the Book of Enoch. Please listen to this.
Well, yes and no, because it contains truths and falsehoods contemporaneously, just like other apocryphal books. We find also the names of Joachim and Anne in the apocryphal literature, which, according to the saints, is true. So the apocryphal literature contains some truths, but here's the danger. It's interwoven with fiction, and the average person doesn't know which is which. This is why, if a person does read the apocryphal books, it is greatly recommended that they do so with guidance, so that they don't take as God's truth something that's false. So the Book of Enoch is reported to have come from the patriarch Enoch, who walked in the company of God as reported in the book of Genesis. And apparently I think it was the Ethiopians who maintained this book for a long time. And there are two different books of Enoch, by the way. One is Ethiopian, I believe the other is Greeks. And the Ethiopian one apparently is the more authentic one, according to the Ethiopians. And it was discovered, I think, or rediscovered in the 18th century. 1770 something, and it contains information about the Watchers, the Nephilim, that is, these beings that came from above, fell from above, that conspired together, and they chose this leader to work together with them to have relations with the daughters of men, sort of like plotting, which is a sinful thing, to have relations with the human race and bear offspring that were half and half divine, half human. Now, some have gone so far as to say these offspring were half angels, half humans, but there's no truth in that. That's where it's false, even though I hear some Catholic people believing that. Why? Because the church teaches that angels are pure spirits. They cannot procreate. And even Jesus said, when he was asked about marriage in heaven, he said, when humans die, they become like angels, but there's no marriage in the next life. They cannot give themselves over to procreation because there's no procreation in heaven. So how can the angels procreate if there's no procreation in heaven? They can't. So this is a silly notion that I've heard even some Catholics adopt.
And for the last clip that I'd like to share with you in this video is about one of my favorite saints. As we know, there's a lot of disobedience in the church today, and I thought this is something we can all learn from, what St. Pio did when he was shunned by the church for 10 years.
He was a great saint. Why? Because he did things most saints don't, and that is, first and foremost, exemplified what he taught his spiritual children, to obey Christ through and with and in the church. So Padre Pio obeyed ecclesial authorities, even when Pope Pius XI, the Fatima Pope, removed his faculties for 10 years and forbade him from celebrating public mass and hearing confessions and communicating with certain penitents. And he obeyed. He obeyed. And he was asked at one point to do a radio program, and he declined in obedience in that way. And after 10 years, Pope Pius XI made a statement when he found the truth of Padre Pio Stigmata and his mystical experiences. And that statement was, I was not badly disposed toward Padre Pio. I was badly informed by his own peers. They misinformed him. And this happens probably today too with the present Pope as well. But the important point is this. God sees the intention and God rewards accordingly, even if a person is wrong. Now, Padre Pio made also this statement too. Saints are made, but woe to those who make them. And that's true as well. So if a person is deliberately causing a person issues, and through their trials they become holy. That doesn't justify the evildoer's actions, no, provided that evildoer has bad intentions. But Padre Pio stands out as a model to all of us in these end times, to never detach ourselves from Rome, to be loyal to that for which Christ shed his most precious blood and of which we are members, and that is the mystical body of Christ, of which he is the head, and that he will espouse in the book of Revelation when he is called the bridegroom and the church the bride.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please don't hesitate to let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like what we do and you'd like to support our works, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers.